We're in the information age, but facts are in short supply. Reject the noise, ask bold questions, and seek the truth with FBI whistleblower and common sense extremist Steve Friend. This is the American Radicals Podcast.
It is the American Radicals Podcast. It's Tuesday, February 3rd, 2026. Thank you for joining us today live on rumble.com/amradpod and YouTube at amradpod1. If you want to check us out over at Spotify, give us a follow there. We'd appreciate it. Trying to grow, expand the brand. You can check out the audio as well on iTunes and iHeart if you prefer. We drop all of that about 1 o'clock after we get done here, where we come to you live at noontime every single weekday. And today is going to be all about the tidal waves, the impending tidal waves that are coming. And that's going to be in the form of FBI lies to distract you from their Epstein failures, as well as the Epstein documents themselves coming in as a tsunami. We'll have our opinions about how that's happened and build up how this is a timeline that is worth going into if you're going to do a legitimate investigation of what's transpired over the Department of Justice. The Charlie Kirk non-assassin was just charged with the crime. 30 by 30, worth going back into. Yours truly put out an op-ed, a year or so ago, and we're seeing it rear its ugly head yet again. The GOP voted to spend billions of your dollars on not you and not Americans, and then also a bellwether election for the midterms transpired down in Texas. So we'll get to all of it. Let's get after it. I want to begin back at the ex-girlfriend, which had itself a good weekend and a half going into this partial government shutdown that happened. And then there was an Epstein document dump, and everybody was all on social media. And I couldn't help noticing, though, that the mainstream media wasn't that interested in covering it. But what happened with that versus where they're trying to pivot? Because the tidal wave of Epstein documents is one thing. Also, the tidal wave of covering and narratives we're seeing on cable news was available. So let's begin with the director of the FBI, Kashyap Patel, who went out there to say just how awesome a job he's doing. Don't mind that pesky Epstein list.
One of the things that we are doing is highlighting the work we've done to protect our children. Just this past year alone under President Trump's leadership, we have found and identified 6,000 missing kids. That's up 22%. We have arrested, the FBI, 1,700 top child predators. That's up 10%. And the following is maybe some of the most impressive work the FBI is doing. You are very familiar with the nihilistic, violent, extremist community online, preying on our kids, forcing them to maim and mutilate themselves, and even sometimes commit suicide. We are up 490% in the number of FBI arrests for the NVE community, and specifically that 764 network that targets our children. We're up over 30% in arrests related to the 764 network. Wow. And the credit goes to the interagency and the men and women in the FBI working together with DOJ to bring these perpetrators to justice.
Okay, thank you very much, Kash Patel, for that update. Now, those statistics that he loves to throw out there to confuse you with the numbers. And it really does bother me when a guy who is not only not married, but is childless likes to talk about our children. Sniff, sniff. But I want to actually analyze a little bit of the information that he presented there, because I'm a numbers guy and I do have a certain level of subject matter expertise on what he's throwing out that you might have. I want to impart that knowledge to you here on the AmRad pod. So 6,000 missing children. Really? 6,000? You recovered 500 children a month? Well, if you recovered them, and actually recovering a child isn't when you put your hands on them and give them back to mom and dad. It's just identifying a kid in a CSAM video, child sexual abuse material. So if you're able to identify who that person is, and it might be an adult at this point, because a lot of the child pornography that's circulating out there is years old, that's a recovery. by the FBI from their statistical accounting. And they don't even do a lot of it. A lot of it comes from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, NCMEC, people actually doing God's work over there, people who view this vile content all day long, to the point where they are familiar with a particular video series and they know a child who has been victimized and exploited for lots of different videos, and they come up with little pseudonyms for them. They say, oh yeah, that's Sarah. And then if they're able to actually do some sort of investigation on their part, or they cooperate with local law enforcement, and rarely the FBI involved, but they figure out that Sarah's name is actually Jane Doe, and she lived in upper Wisconsin in the 1990s, and they figure out who she is. That's a recovery from the FBI. So 500 kids a month? No, not so much. He also said that NVEs, nihilistic violent extremists, people with no ideology. Actually, the NVE is the swap in, swap out for the FBI, who still has it on the books, but they're trying not to investigate the anti-government, anti-authority violent extremists, the agaves, because those were MAGA supporters. And this FBI is not really focused on that, but they want to keep that in their back pocket for the next FBI. But nihilistic violent extremists, people with no ideology, and they're trying to jam that square peg into that round hole with child exploitation matters. And he talks about the 764s out there. They're basically teenagers who are trolling online that the FBI waits for them to turn 18 and then arrests them. And he threw out a very specific number, 490%. I mean, that's how you know it's real. It's a specific number, right? I mean, he could easily just say almost 500%. Well, a couple things about statistics. There's lies, damn lies, and statistics. I think that's a Mark Twainism. Whenever you throw out a stat, there's a baseline number. We didn't get that from Cash, but he did give us a very specific number, 490%. So that would mean if you had 100 and it went up 490%, then it would go to 590. But we know that nihilistic violent extremists is a very new thing. So the most logical takeaway is that it was 10 guys who were arrested for this non-terrorism terrorism in 2024, and then 59 in 2025. I mean, you upped it, and I'm not really actually sure why you upped it, because again, they have no ideology, but you just crammed a bunch of alleged pedophiles into a terrorism category. So you went from 10 to 59, both 2 digits, not really that impressive. And, there's also some inconsistencies with the numbers that Kash Patel gives out there. As much as he is specific, there are some things that are not really checking with what the Deputy Attorney General, Todd Blanche, went out there. So got a video from him, which might contradict a little bit. He's trying to hype up what the Department of Justice is doing and distract from the tidal wave of documents that they dumped at the American people's footsteps. But I don't think he's doing that good of a job. Todd Blanche, everyone.
I want to talk for a minute about something that is important. Every single day of the year, the Department of Justice investigates and prosecutes those who abuse and traffic young women and children. Just last year, the FBI located over 2,700 victims of child exploitation. The Department of Justice found and terminated 3.8 million dark web pedophile accounts. In August, we charged 11 defendants for extensive sex trafficking in Los Angeles of illegal immigrants and underage women. Last month, we charged 5 men who were engaged in a sadistic sextortion network of deranged young men abusing women. Over the past several months, last summer and into the fall, we executed Operation Restore Justice, rescuing 205 child victims and arresting 293 offenders. I point this out because I take umbrage at the suggestion, which is totally false, that the Attorney General or this department does not take child exploitation or sex trafficking seriously.
He takes umbrage because he's doing mop-up duty after Pam Bondi has failed or maybe succeeded from her perspective. Who knows where her motivations are with Epstein. We'll get to that in a second, but I want to focus in on a couple of the bullet points that came from Todd Blanche there. He said 2,700 victims of child sexual abuse. Well, I thought it was 6,000. So were you lying then or were you lying now? I'm going to actually bet that Todd Blanche is accurate on that, which would mean that Kash Patel is more than doubling what the FBI was able to rescue. I mean, just get a name with a face. 3.8 million pedophile accounts. Okay. How long does it take that pedophile to open a new account? It's like digging a hole and then filling the hole back up. So nothing really there. Pokes your finger in the jello, no real impact. But you get to claim a disruption. It sounds really awesome. Then the last one, Operation Restore Justice. I mean, that was the big thing they were pushing in the very first few months of the FBI. And they were talking about how they were out there rescuing kids and interdicting pedophiles. And it was a new and novel concept that never had been before attempted and tried because Kash Patel is just so darn awesome. That's not true. Operation Cross Country is something that's been in effect for about a decade and a half, maybe even longer. And all Kash Patel did was rename it and call it Operation Restore Justice. And it's the exact same thing, going out and trying to catch a pedophile, to catch a predator style. You know, you put out these fake offers and see who arrives and then you grab them. That's good. We want that. But to claim that you invented this is wholly inappropriate and dishonest. Now, on the subject of dishonesty, let's talk about some Epstein stuff. Maybe dishonesty is appropriate, but I'm more of like a legal guy, so I'm thinking something like perjury might actually be the more appropriate terminology.
There's no credible information. None. If there were, I would bring the case yesterday that he trafficked to other individuals. And the information we have, again, is limited.
So the answer is no one
For the information that we have
in the files.
in the case file.
That's Kash Patel again, testifying under oath to the Senate Judiciary Committee that there was no evidence at all that Jeffrey Epstein had any clients, nobody else. He was just a voracious appetite for underage women. Ghislaine Maxwell just helped him traffic to himself, which is why we have 3 million pages that were just released for a case that's closed, but it's an ongoing investigation. I mean, some of this stuff's not making sense here. And look, I'm a trained investigator, and one of the things that I always like to do if I'm going to dig into a case and try to see if there's been a violation of law, or here, I just want to get to what is happening over at the Department of Justice and the FBI. I think the timeline, to me, is worth going into. So, before the Trump administration Part 2 came in, I was part of a group of people that made some recommendations about the FBI. And one of the things was Epstein. And one of the recommendations was that there needed to be a group of agents and federal prosecutors who were experienced, not managers, but actual frontline prosecutors and agents who were experienced, who could be sequestered outside of Washington, D.C. to go back and review everything in the Epstein file, to go through it, bring forward a reasonable investigation, a lawful prosecution if it was necessary, and then also to release information in a timely and progressive fashion that was organized and digestible so the American people would have it flowing to them, not in a just giant tidal wave, but in a way where we said, okay, we know that these guys are going through it scrupulously, and we will give them the latitude that is necessary. Even if it's 6 to 8 months, as long as we're getting regular intervals of information sharing, I think that the American people, R&D, conservative and communist, would have been on board for that. But that didn't happen. Instead, Trump administration comes in, and we got Pam Bondi saying, the Epstein files are on my desk. So that didn't work. So we had Bindergate, and that didn't work. And it actually turned a lot of the influencers against the Trump administration with this particular topic. And that's not a good thing, because this is a very online administration. These guys who have been appointed to positions of prominence with the government, they're concerned about their follower counts. They got to do some engagement farming. So how are we going to clean up? Well, first, we got to solidify our base, our real base in the eyes of Donald Trump and Pam Bondi and Susie Wiles. the Fox News base. So they send Kash Patel, Dan Bongino over to have a struggle session, hostage video, sit-down interview on Fox News with Maria Bartiromo. And she asks him about Epstein's death. And Dan Bongino, shoulders slumped, says, "I've seen the file. He killed himself." And that dog just won't hunt again, because Dan Bongino was one of the loudest voices saying, "Do not let Epstein go," and just didn't make any sense. And they tried to release some of the video, and then there was some sections missing. And again, people are very suspicious. So how are we going to pivot again? Well, over July 4th weekend, when there's some really deadly flooding happening in Texas, there was a sudden leak to Axios from the Department of Justice and the FBI. They both signed on for it, and they said, "Oh, there is no client list." In fact, Jeffrey Epstein, not only did he kill himself, he has a voracious appetite for underage women, and he was only trafficking to himself. And yet again, missed the mark with the base and with the American people at large. So we get a little bit more defense. We get Pam Bondi saying, "Okay, all right, we do have stuff, but it's child pornography. I can't give it to you. We're just not going to release it." And then a whole bunch of people said, "Yeah, there's stuff that's not child pornography. You're going to have to release it to us. In fact, we're going to demand our Congress do that for us." So Thomas Massey, Republican, Ro Khanna, Democrat, came together very much like the American people came together after the Afghanistan withdrawal in the first year of the Biden administration. And around the same time, too. I mean, you're talking about 8-9 months after. And they said, "We have a lot of universal support across the political spectrum. We're going to pass legislation right now." And it wasn't just a couple of dastardly Republicans. It was basically unanimous in both houses of Congress. I think one no vote in the House. And the Senate was unanimous, and the president signed the Epstein Transparency Act immediately. And then they were in material breach. They just didn't turn over the information. It's really hard. So you know what we should do? We should ask Bill Barr, the bagpipe playing douchebag, to write an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal saying Pam Bondi's doing the best she can, and really what we should be focusing on is passing laws against things that we already have laws, like drug trafficking and corruption. And finally, we go to the nuclear option. The nuclear option being similar to a civil lawsuit where there's a discovery process and there's a subpoena issued, and they say, "You need to give me this document." So because one side doesn't really want to cooperate, they say, "Okay, I'll maliciously cooperate with this subpoena. And instead of giving you the 5 pieces of paper that would just be awesome for your case, I'm going to give you 5 million pages of documents. And almost all of them are irrelevant. And I'll just leave it up to you to find those 5 pages in a condensed time span," which is what brought us up to last week, heading into the partial government shutdown, a dump of over 3 million documents. Now, why would they go with the nuclear option here? I mean, it still isn't too late. Theoretically, they could just sequester a bunch of agents and prosecutors. I mean, people's patience is nothing at this point, but at least if you articulated it, maybe you get a little bit of patience, particularly if you give documents at regular intervals. I'm talking about like every Friday you're giving them out. But instead, they went with the giant dump. Well, to me, it's pretty clear. I think that they want to have a huge volume of these documents out there and videos and pictures so that we can get back to R&D. And one side can find their targets they want to go after and go, "Aha, you're a bad guy. That side's the bad guy." And the other side can find their targets and they go, "Aha, found it. They're the bad guys." And we can go to warring factions as opposed to focusing on what the real concern about Epstein was and remains, and that is, who are the elite pedophile rapists? Now, secondarily, why is there a cover-up from the government? I think that's just as important. And it doesn't have to be limited to one particular thing. For everybody out there saying, "Oh, it's a Mossad thing, it's an intelligence thing." Okay, that doesn't mean that that's the only thing. I mean, it could just be that you're doing favors for your buddies and you're trying not to let them get jammed up. Or maybe there's some prominent financial connections here. I mean, if there's a CEO from a Fortune 500 company who's looped into the Epstein stuff, I mean, his company stock could tank, and then that would bring down the entire stock market. We can't have that. There could be a plethora of reasons behind it, which is worth getting into, which is why we actually need a logical and reasonable investigation to go into all of it. And that's not happening. Instead, we get a giant tidal wave of documents and videos and photos, with the hope being, and we saw some of it over the weekend, that crazies out there would be able to insert counterfeit documents and say, aha, this just proves everything that I've been saying since the very beginning about whatever my cause is. And then some people jump on it, and then it's disproven later on. And then the Department of Justice has a narrative, and they can say, you see, this is why we were reticent to release this information to begin with. We would have been better if we just kept it as an ongoing investigation. Let's blame Thomas Massie. I mean, that last part is sort of theoretical. That's my going hypothesis, but I've been trying to poke and prod any sort of holes in it, and I can't. Now, to me, what are my concerns here? I'm not going to the DOJ portal. I'm not looking and culling through these. Lots of people are doing that. The documents that are of interest to me and should be of interest to somebody like a Thomas Massie or Ro Khanna, who wants to get to what actually happened here, are FBI documents, not just the emails or correspondences or images. I'm talking about the actual FD 302, FD 1099s, those federal forms that are part of the way that these documents are organized, because the way that it was released is not organized, very purposely so. It's, again, it's like a giant discovery dump, a pallet of papers, and, maybe something interesting in there. But the actual FBI documents are interesting to me. Why? Well, they have the individuals who are conducting the investigation's names on them. They might be redacted for the public, but I think they should be made available to congressional members when they're doing their oversight here. I want to know who the prosecutors are. I want to know who the supervisors are. I want to know who the BRIC agents are, so that they can be queried to find out what exactly was going on with this investigation and why has it just been so poorly conducted. I also want to know, what's their background? Where are they siloed? What sort of cases do they work? I mean, do they work public corruption? Do they work crimes against children? Do they work foreign counterintelligence? I think that will tell us the most, at least in the initial outset, and then we can develop a strategy for who we want to go after, who looks like they may have been violating the law. And I think ultimately, then we can build it out to find who the primary co-conspirators are. But that's not going to be happening in the very near future. That's a logical and thoughtful and sober-minded investigation. And that does take time. I just don't know how much patience the American people have for it, particularly when we have the DOJ withholding it and going through that timeline again of not cooperating with the American people and then just doing a giant tidal wave dump, which I think will come back to bite them, and we'll get to towards the end of the show today. Now, we'll stay within the DOJ and the FBI as we move off of Epstein and go on to some other stuff. Now, this is a press release here, and it came from DOJ Maine, and it's about an antitrust case. Steve, why are you talking about that? That sounds nerdy. Well, I mean, a couple reasons. Headline: Antitrust Division and U.S. Postal Service make first ever whistleblower payment. $1 million awarded for reporting an antitrust crime. So, as background, and I won't get too much into it because it is kind of like nerdy, but we have the DOJ prosecuting this company called E-Block. E-Block is an online auction platform for used vehicles. They wound up acquiring another company, and that company was doing some shenanigans that E-Block just kind of said, all right, we'll just look the other way. We're buying this company. They're kind of shady, and they're driving the prices up artificially on their online auction website. So we'll just reap the rewards from it. I mean, that's kind of the cliff notes of what the scheme was. Now, whistleblower came forward and exposed this scheme of artificially raising the prices of vehicles on an online auction, and that resulted in $16 million of fraud that went on. The E-Block was able to pocket $16 million more than they probably should have. The Department of Justice awarded the whistleblower $1 million. Wow, I mean, that's great. I mean, they should be lauded. And I think the statement came from an assistant attorney or a deputy assistant attorney general. I mean, there's just the government's too big. So from the piece here, and the comment from Omid Asefi, Deputy Assistant Attorney General. Whistleblowers serve as the justice system's greatest disinfectant against criminal antitrust conspiracies. This whistleblower helped expose a brazen $16 million scheme that made it more expensive for hardworking Americans to afford secondhand cars across the country. Okay, why are you bringing this up, Steve? Well, there's an actual law for whistleblowers outside of government. This was a private citizen. There's a reward. If you're working within government, your job is to whistleblow, and then they make it not your job anymore, and you get suspended and have your security clearance revoked and your life completely ruined. But for this person, they reported it, and now the Department of Justice has secured a deferred sentence. So they've convicted this company, and the individual's there. Nobody went to jail, though, and they got a fine of about $3 million that this company's supposed to pay. So they stole 16. They have to pay 3 back to daddy government. And the DOJ is happy to kick over $1 million to the whistleblower. But the law says, the False Claims Act, they're supposed to get 15 to 30% of the actual fraud that was revealed. Well, that would be $2.5 million. So they stiffed the whistleblower by about 150%. Well done, Department of Justice, but that shouldn't really stun anybody in the American Radicals podcast audience. And as a reminder, guys, if you're joining us on rumble.com/amradpod or YouTube, amradpod1, make sure you give us a nice thumbs up, follow, subscribe, because the Department of Justice to date still hasn't given back pay to any of the 10 FBI whistleblowers that they struck a deal with in August 2025. They were supposed to give all of them back pay within 30 days. They are now well in material breach of that. Seems like it's the same thing as always. They just fail because they want to, because who's going to go after them? They're the largest law firm in the history of the world. More stories worth getting into about FBI trying to deflect, trying to distract from the tidal wave of failures that we have seen over the last year plus of the Trump administration part 2. Let's talk Charlie Kirk briefly. Headline USA.com reports, initial suspect in Charlie Kirk assassination is sentenced to jail. Not the actual assassin, though, who's being prosecuted at a state level. But the FBI doesn't want you to know that. They want you to think they're really in on this case, that the Utah authorities haven't completely cut them out of it as they should, because the murder is a state charge in Utah and probably being investigated far superior fashion than at the FBI. But the guy here, his name is George Zinn. He's 71 years old. After Charlie Kirk was shot, he shouted, "I shot him, now shoot me." And I mean, rightfully so. He was taken into custody immediately. He then said when he was interrogated, "No, I didn't. And I was just saying that to draw attention away." Apparently, this guy, George Zinn, is a known rabble-rouser, kind of a crazy kook. And he made the FBI look bad, because who remembers Kash Patel going out there saying, "We have the guy in custody. We can all go to Valhalla now and be happy." Made him look like kind of a jerk, kind of a punk. And then Kash Patel needed to get his pound of flesh, right? So they jammed him up with obstruction charges, and actually he wound up having child pornography on his phone. So I'm not going to cry for him going to prison for 15 years, but in the context of what we're talking about today, unless you're really paying attention, you just kind of see in passing, Charlie Kirk, suspect, sentenced to jail 15 years. You would think, oh, job well done. The feds got him? All right, FBI, finally doing the work of the American people, when really just a crazy dude who yelled out loud, and they happened to look at his phone to see if he was involved in the assassination, and they jammed him up. And that is not what the American people really wanted. But you can get distracted from their Epstein failures and say, all right, high fives, back slaps, helmet stickers all around. Okay, we can go away temporarily from the FBI, and because this is a larger law enforcement matter, and it's something that I've talked about before and actually written about before, and that's the 30 by 30 initiative. But before we do that, I want to kind of cue us up, because I saw this video and it got me thinking, is this thing still around, 30 by 30? This is a recruiting video from the Philadelphia Sheriff's Office trying to get the ladies to join up.
Live in the building. Out there's no out there, sir. You ready? Where them fans at? Where them fans at? Where them fans at? Hit me one time. Oh, 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 I got my boots on the ground. Yeah.
All right, we'll pause it there. I mean, not monetized yet, but probably still find out that I got demonetized. The Philadelphia Sheriff's Office, which doesn't actually do what you think a sheriff's office probably does, which is law enforcement. They kind of just do the managing of evictions, and they handle the courthouse. They do some of the jail service stuff. Not like they're going out there and answering calls for service. When you call 911, the Philadelphia Sheriff's Office is not coming. But they are trying to recruit the ladies there, and they think that that dance is going to do it. Now, why would they be interested in recruiting the ladies? They have a crazy communist as the sheriff, so maybe that's why. Or maybe it's something else. 30 by 30, a blast from the past that has now reared its ugly head back to the present. So from police1.com, I've got this latest piece. From momentum to meaningful change, how advancing women is reshaping policing. Decades of research confirm that advancing women in policing improves public safety, not just representation. Women officers are less likely to use force, more successful in supporting victims, less often the subject of complaints, and widely viewed as more trustworthy and compassionate. The pivotal development in this movement was the launch of the 30 by 30 initiative in 2021. 2021 being the first year of the human Roomba, auto pen presidency, Biden madness, let's go Brandon. So we had to completely remake law enforcement. And I think that this is veiled as some sort of equity matter, that defend your gender, should women be in policing type of question aside. This is a way to stealth get Marxism into law enforcement. Don't trust me, or actually do trust me on this because I've written on this. So this was about a research that I did. I mean, I did it quite a bit. I put this out October of 2024. This is right in the immediate aftermath of the Trump would-be assassination in Butler, Pennsylvania. And I thought it was worth going into. The deadly experiment endangered Trump's life and the imperils of public safety, because I researched the 30 by 30 initiative and came out with a couple things that should be of concern to people who generally worry about public safety, yours truly being chief amongst them, and anybody who just wants to not get robbed or raped. But 30 by 30 Initiative's website offers resources and summaries to explain what it is doing. One document is policing is a traditionally male-dominated profession, and even today, white heterosexual men comprise the majority of law enforcement. And then it talks about a culture of homophobia. And then there's also a white culture within law enforcement. White culture. Where have I heard that before? Oh, the Smithsonian did a whole thing on that. Who remembers this? White culture. Talking about race. This is from the, I don't know, it was a poster that was put out. It was an entire display in the Smithsonian. And what is white culture and how it was problematic, because it involved rugged individualism, a nuclear family structure, a Protestant work ethic, and religious being Judeo-Christian, and then an understanding of justice being rooted in English common law, like all the regular things that you would expect to be an objectively good thing. And that was a problem. So 30 by 30 wants to do away with that sort of culture. They want to do away with other things like job knowledge tests. I mean, why would you want a police officer to know how to do the job of a police officer? Or grooming standards, because it's discriminatory. You want to be able to allow women in there because they can have long hair that can be grabbed onto with a fight. Or you don't want them to have to cut their nails, which could actually injure somebody. Or they should be able to keep on some fancy jewelry, which can do some major damage if they, again, have to engage in violence with somebody. This is cultural Marxism that's been swept into law enforcement. But America's so back. We're so based right now, right? I mean, which is why when I went to the 30 by 30 initiative website, I was a little bit surprised to find a couple of things. Here are some of their partners. the Bureau of Justice Assistance and the National Institute of Justice, both arms of the Department of Justice, still currently prominently displayed in the 30 by 30 initiative. Now, maybe they didn't update it. Maybe they did, because back in the day, back in the bad old days when it was that FBI, we got releases like this. And this again comes from the FBI's page, their news source, March 2023. FBI pledges to advance women in policing. This is the announcement that the FBI was signing on for this 30 by 30 initiative, which seems kind of like Marxist and racist. And this was a statement from then Director Christopher Wray. The FBI is committed to ensuring our work environment supports the recruitment, development, and advancement of our female sworn officers. This important commitment reflects our continued dedication to bringing more women into our special agent cadre, FBI police, and the FBI's leadership ranks. 30 by 30, for those who don't know, is the goal of 30% representation of females in law enforcement personnel by 2030, not just the rank and file, not just the brick agents, but in leadership. Well, that's the bad old days, right? That's 2023. But is it really gone? I mean, we have Kash Patel out there announcing that he's identified 6,000 victims of child sexual abuse. And they're taking down terrorists, 490% increase in there. I mean, they've gotten back to being cops, which again is why I was a little bit surprised. And if you're listening to us on Spotify, iHeart, iTunes, I mean, might be time. On Spotify, you can flip on the visual, but you can jump over at Rumble and YouTube and see when I went to who's actually still signed up for 30 by 30, and you'll see it highlighted there around middle of the screen towards the left side, the Federal Bureau of Investigation under Kash Patel. Still signed up for 30 by 30. All right, a couple more I want to get to here. We can get off of the FBI and law enforcement and cover down on a couple of other matters as we're talking about a tidal wave, and a tidal wave that is approaching this year. That'll be our last piece. This comes from the centersquare.com, and it's a discussion about the Senate Republicans failing to halt welfare funding for non-citizens. And this was also announced on social media by Rand Paul, who had introduced this amendment. He was trying to get the United States Senate, which allegedly is run by Republicans, even though all the policies go through are supported by Democrats and a couple are peeled off. So I think you can make the case it's actually a Democrat-run institution at this point, communist-run. But Rand Paul introduced the End Welfare for Non-Citizens Act to end taxpayer benefits for refugees, asylees, and immigrants earlier this week. And yet it failed. How badly? Well, it looks like 20 Republicans voted to spend $6 billion of your money on not you, not other Americans, but on refugees. Now, the fund was set for about $2 billion in the first year of the Biden administration, and then they let in millions of illegal aliens who they called refugees or asylum seekers or parolees, and it went up to like between $9 and $10 billion that were spent of your money. Well, now we got to pare that back. I mean, it's 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, 1 step forward again, because we're going to $6 billion. We're not even back down to pre-Biden levels, but the Republicans, which are the fiscal conservatives, small government, small r Republican, constitutionally concerned, we got to rein in that out-of-control government. They couldn't get a majority to vote to not spend $6 billion. They got 40% of their caucus to vote actually to spend that money. Tidal wave of money going to not you. Here's another one. This is in Louisiana. This is the candidate Trump endorsed for Senate in Louisiana, and she's talking about some worker visas. Let me know if this is something that you voted for.
Hi, Louisiana. This is Congresswoman Julia Letlow, and I have some exciting news to report. I just heard back from the Trump administration that they will change a rule that was going to adversely affect our crawfish farmers, our shrimp farmers, who rely on H-2B visa workers to continue their good work. They are going to be able to continue now that President Trump has delivered for them. And I am so grateful to President Trump for doing this for Louisiana. It is all about building relationships and to get things done. And you cannot vote to impeach the president and expect results like this. I'm Julia Letlow. I will continue working hard for Louisiana.
So we got more H-2B visas for crawfish in Louisiana. Foreign workers, that's what that means. America first. And be sure to not impeach the president who's doing exactly what the Biden administration wanted to do. He's still going to get impeached. How do I know he's still going to get impeached? Because I want to go to the last piece of the day. This is from a Substack, and its headline is "The Blue Wave Watch. Democrat flips Trump plus 17 Texas Senate seat in a 32-point swing." This is a special election that just transpired in Texas. Democrat candidate Taylor Remitt won a special election for the Texas Senate District 9 in Tarrant County. Donald Trump won that county by 17 points. And this guy not only flipped it, he flipped it by 32 points. So, tidal wave. We had a tidal wave of failures by the Department of Justice. They're trying to compensate by giving you a tidal wave of fake statistical accomplishments. And then they gave you another tidal wave of documents attributing it to the Epstein case. So hopefully you don't actually find out what happened there. You get confused and muddled around by the millions of documents available. And apart from that, they're not doing things like fixing the DEI and the 30 by 30 marxism that has just poisoned the well, and not just state and local law enforcement, but federal as well. It's still there. No corrective action taken. Away from that, we have the Republicans allegedly in control of the United States Senate voting away billions of dollars of your money for not you and not other Americans, but to foreigners. And we're going around fist bumping, high-fiving, helmet stickers so that we can get more foreign workers in Louisiana for a Trump-backed candidate. There's a tidal wave coming, guys. It's coming in November, and it's their own fault. I don't blame anybody for saying this is not what I voted for. And you know what? November rolls around, I might be a little bit busy that day. It's their own fault. All right. So that's going to wrap us up for today. But I do have a palate cleanse because, it's kind of topical for what we're talking about. This is what I think about when the Republicans are out there every single day on cable news and print media, and particularly social media, where they're just engagement farming all the time, telling us how awesome of a job we're doing. And we're all just sitting back going, it's let's go Brandon, just from the other side, the flip side of that coin. Today's palate cleanse. This is George W. Bush. That's what happens before the tsunami hits you in the back of the head. All right, guys. Thanks again for joining us today on rumble.com/amradpod, YouTube, amradpod1, Spotify, iTunes, iHeart. If you haven't already, just do all those things. Give us a follow, subscribe, and likes, thumbs up. We really appreciate it. Drop some comments in there. And we plan to be back with you tomorrow, noontime Eastern. Until then, have a great day.
You've been listening to the American Radicals Podcast. Find us on YouTube, Rumble, and X at AmRadPod.